Good morning, everybody. Really excited to be here. My name is Bob Wiggins, and I'm about to introduce our two guests to kind of get everybody into the mindset. Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it until these guys. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Steven Quiring and Jamie McKee, who are the founders and leaders of StormImpact. Steven, why don't we just start with you for a moment? Tell us a little bit about your background and experience and yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I got into this. My background is a Ph.D. in climatology. And then I was a faculty member at Texas A&M University for 11 years. And while I was there, being in Texas, hurricanes have a major impact, obviously, on infrastructure. And I had the opportunity to begin a research program that is in the weather and climate data analytics space. And so looking at the impacts of weather and climate on a variety of infrastructure systems, especially electrical utilities. In 2016, I moved to The Ohio State University, and that's where I'm also today, so I have to wear two hats. And this morning, for the OSU lawyers, I'm wearing my hat for co-founder and president of StormImpact. But after this, I'll take that hat off and go back to my office on campus and meet with some students. And so, being from Canada, I understand that the weather has a big impact on our day-to-day lives, and this has been an exciting journey for me to take it from a research lab into the quote-unquote real world, leave the ivory tower, and take the tech to market.
Good morning, everyone. Jamie McKee, CEO for StormImpact. Also a pleasure to be here in front of everyone here. I have a little bit more operations management style background. I originally come from Edinburgh, Scotland, so you may hear a little bit of an accent in there. So happy to talk about that all day long if you want to, but we're here for other reasons. I come from international background, traveling around the world with my parents, non-military, so a lot of up and rotation and getting up and moving countries. I've got a lot of inherited flexibility with life's circumstances, and so I ended up being a professional rugby player back in the day, hung in my boots a while ago, but really was in the operations side for many years, made it across to the States on a 90-day visa, wanted to stay, got on an MBA, loved that, and really got into the business operations side, got involved in marketing, sales, international business for the longest time, import-export, and then moved back to Columbus and got involved in, I came into town and one of my friends said, hey, let's do a startup, and I was like, what's a startup? And kind of got baptism by fire, became COO for two healthcare IT companies. Wonderful ride, also, and then outside of that got involved in more operations stuff, and then that's when Steven and I met and kind of got us to where we are today. So a bit more detail behind that I can talk about, but not right now. So over to you, Bob.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Jamie. I got it. Yeah, you really have to hold this close to make it work. So we've got a very international team here, Canada and Scotland. We've got all sports covered, rugby and golf. So we also have a company that we're building. You know, Steven, maybe if you could, let's hear the 60-second elevator pitch for what StormImpact is.
Absolutely. Thanks.
And this is not a test.
Right, thanks for teeing it up. And this is always something that one should be prepared and ready to give. So the electrical power system is essential for both economic security and quality of life. And over the last few decades, electrical utilities have been dealing with increasingly damaging storms. In fact, in the United States, the weather-related power disruptions are responsible for more than $60 billion in annual damage and losses. And so there are two main ways that electrical utilities can attempt to deal with that. The first is through infrastructure hardening. And infrastructure hardening is great, but it is very expensive and it's a very long-term process. The second way that they can deal with it is through optimizing the storm restoration process. So when you lose power, more quickly restoring it by having their crews and resources placed in an optimal position. So StormImpact provides machine learning solutions to optimize that storm restoration process. We use machine learning models and weather forecasts to provide electrical utilities with predictions about where and when and how many customers will lose power. We also provide predictions of damages and outages and their crew needs to restore that power. Through our cloud-based data dashboards, we provide utilities with access to forecast data, to the predictive analytics from our models, and with in-app notifications and email notifications about the impacts of impending weather. And so StormImpact is designed to provide electrical utilities with the information that they need to better prepare for and respond to storms.
A little more than 60 seconds, but that was also very good. I think we've got a sense of it. Just to follow up on that, storms have been around for a long time. Electric utilities have been around for a long time. This sounds like a huge issue for them. How do they deal with it if they're not using StormImpact? What's the status quo that you're faced with in the industry?
Yeah, electrical utilities are going through a transition, a demographic transition as their workforce is aging. And so many electrical utilities traditionally have relied on institutional knowledge, on the fact that some of their employees have been there for decades and they say, okay, I remember Sandy or I remember Michael and this is what we did and this is how we prepared. And so it's been much more based on experience and intuition and not leveraging the latest and greatest in terms of machine learning models and predictive analytics.
So we've got a big problem for a big industry with a big market. As you're a researcher, a scientist, a professor, all those kind of things. When did you first think that there was a here, and how did you decide that the software really addresses this very serious problem that the utilities have? What's the genesis of that?
Yeah, so this goes back to when I lived in College Station, Texas, and was a professor at Texas A&M University, and there was a Gulf Coast electrical utility that was interested in better preparing for the impacts of hurricanes. And working with a professor in engineering there, we developed the very first models for hurricane-related outage prediction. And over the years, we've talked to many other electrical utilities and realized how many challenges they're facing, especially because it's very expensive and difficult for them to develop and maintain these models in-house. So they're extremely open to having something that is a cloud-based solution that is off-premises that they can just subscribe to and have access to, as opposed to building and maintaining it in-house. It's cheaper, easier, and better for their operations. But as a faculty member, the solutions that we built are really not optimal for commercialization. They're a great R&D tool. They make a nice paper in an IEEE journal, but they aren't really something that can be readily deployed by the utilities. And moving to Ohio State and working with some of the electrical utilities here in Ohio opened up that opportunity to develop and test and deploy models that utilities could use operationally and then also demonstrated that this was a commercially viable path to pursue.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand this was being done while you are a professor at Ohio State, you know, within the purview, and we'll get into the technology commercialization office and the spin-out aspect of that in a moment. Maybe Jamie, could you tell us a little bit about how the technology works? I mean, what does it do? You know, I wouldn't get like deep into the weeds, but just kind of at a high level, a little background on that.
Sure, I won't dare to get into the details that Steven can get into, yeah, it really is, it's a data dashboard that utilities can access, and there are several tables in there. There's different numbers that we can limit, we can scale down to the OpCo level, the operational company level. So being a bigger utility, they'll have smaller operating companies that we can zoom down into. And they can look into that technology. They can actually change the date range of what they're looking for in the future. They can look at geographies differently. Emergency management coordinators can look more at a global look, and then you'll have the local operating managers that do the same thing. So there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of adaptability to our platform that can be used at the local level and also the global level. There's graphs and representations of what the outage looks like in the future. So for me as a visual learner, it's a big deal. Once you get into the technology side of things and you really get into the data, you can go down as granular as you want to with what we have. So it's really a very neat platform and a really neat dashboard to display.
One of the things that's particularly interesting about this, it is a spin-out from Ohio State. And before the spin-out, you guys actually developed some pretty serious sales traction. I mean, I've seen quite a few spin-outs from Ohio State, and you're a couple standard deviations from the mean in terms of sales traction. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, the customers that you have now, how you got those initial customers with names that I think everybody in this room is going to be familiar with? Tell us a little bit about that, you know, while you're still teaching at Ohio State.
Yeah, for sure. So our three clients that we are working with and that I acquired while a faculty member at Ohio State is Southern Company, a Gulf Coast utility that serves Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and parts of Florida. First Energy and AEP, which need no introduction as they're both headquartered here in Ohio. And this came about through opportunities provided at Ohio State. There was a Connect and Collaborate grant process that we could pitch ideas to the university. And so I ran a workshop here in Columbus in 2017. I invited 35 utilities to come to Columbus, and we talked about storm impact, storm modeling, storm damage, and the challenges that they had. And part of that led to these conversations. And so the initial genesis for this product came from graduate student Ph.D.s and master's theses and contracts between the utilities and Ohio State University.
And I think it's important to point out, maybe we won't get into the exact details of the numbers, but these are not just pilot contracts where they'll give you some feedback on your product. These are real six-figure contracts. And the lesson I think people should take out of that is, even if you're in very early days, even if you've got an early version of the product, if you're solving an important product for a customer that has money and it's an important problem for them, they're willing to pay for it. And I think you guys, as much as anybody, showed that that's doable and important. So you had the idea, Steven, and you had to build an early version of the product. You've got a team of, I guess, 4, I'm calling full-time folks now, including Jamie, tell us a little bit about how you got Brett and Scott on the team and their roles, and then how you decided that Jamie should join this crew. You needed a rugby player.
Absolutely, yes. There's something, and obviously this goes without saying, but your team is the most important part of the success, or a very important part of the success, and I am extremely blessed to have very good people surrounding me who have helped carry this forward. And so my other two co-founders are people that I was connected with at Ohio State. So a senior researcher who is in my lab, Brett McRoberts. He's the machine learning expert on my team. And then an undergraduate student that was just totally happenstance that we connected. His roommate was taking my class. In the class, I was like, hey, I'm looking to hire a programmer, if anyone knows someone. And so this guy shows up at my office. He's like, yeah, my roommate said you were looking for someone. And so he started working as an hourly undergraduate student on campus. And turns out he's a brilliant world-class programmer. He is currently finishing a Ph.D. at the University of Rochester. And there is not a problem that Scott cannot solve. So the three of us are the co-founders. We have strengths, but we also have a lot of weaknesses, especially on the business side, because I know a lot about weather and climate. I know almost nothing about business. Well, maybe a little bit more now, thanks to Bob.
You actually have some negotiation chops, but you're being a little modest, but keep going.
So we knew that we needed someone to serve as a business lead for us, and finding that person can be pretty challenging because trust is so important. And I'm looking for someone who can fit a very particular role and that I can put my trust in fully. And so again, circumstances worked out really well in this case. Every Thursday morning I get together with a group of guys for breakfast. At this meeting, I was saying, I need to look for someone to lead our business. Does anyone know anyone? And one of the people at the breakfast was like, yeah, I'm connected with Jamie on LinkedIn, and I see that he's looking for something new at this point. You should talk to him. And it turns out I already knew Jamie because Jamie and I play in the same golf league and attend the same church. And so the trust was already there because when you play golf with someone, you know whether they're a trustworthy and even-keeled individual or not.
Your partner, I have questions.
Or whether they are going to tomahawk their clubs or cut strokes or whatever. So it was great how it worked out, that timing and the right person in the right place to step in and really help us take this to the next level.
So it doesn't always work out that way, that you happen to play golf with the person. And sometimes when that happens, it isn't right. But luckily this time it did work out great. So Jamie, you knew that Steven counted all strokes. You knew what his handicap was. You knew, that he never threw the clubs. When he approached you about becoming CEO of this business, and I mean, we had conversations about this, I remember. What did you do to understand the opportunity, to learn about it, and what convinced you at the end of the day this was something you should follow up on?
Yeah, good question. So when having spent 3+ years in a startup companies at that point, I knew due diligence was a thing, and now I was not only on the outside of due diligence, now I was the one doing it, and it's a whole different ball of wax. So I looked at it from several standpoints. One of them was, I'm looking at the company, where is it at? I'm looking at the technology, where is that at? I'm looking at the people, who are they? And fourthly, I was looking at what's the vision? these three founders who got together, I'm sure, when they put money down, that there are three different personalities, three different characters. How do they join together to quote unquote row in the same direction? And so I did my research, and I immersed myself into excuse the pun, the landscape of environmental science, and kind of looked into the weather technologies that were out there, what is the sciences out there, and then Steven and I were, playing golf, and we had conversations at several different times, and so I loved the idea of the technology, and how long it had been around, and the genesis that it got to, the iterations that it got to, how robust it was. And then I was definitely looking at the customers, and I thought, those are not small customers, those are really big. And then the third of the four was looking at the individual founders. So Steve and I somewhat knew over the years. We had met on occasion at the golf course, and then on and off at church. And the more I got to talk with Steve, and the more I was well educated and more educated in the environmental science, the climatology side of things, and then obviously the technology side of things. And then I had interviews, and I set them up. I wanted to speak to Brent, I wanted to speak to Scott, and I said, okay guys, I want an hour of your time, and you ask me questions, I ask you questions, that kind of thing. So we drilled it all the way down and came back out, and I found out who they were, what their characters were about, what their strengths and weaknesses were, and that's really what tipped it for me. These guys, Steven just talks very casually about Brent and Scott because he worked for them for so long. I'm here to tell you that they are brilliant. I mean, they're all PhDs, or at least Scott's going to be a PhD, and they all have these brilliant sides to them, and all of it kind of blends really nicely into this team that is a visionary team that all I have to do is come along for the ride and kind of point them in the right direction, which is really great. And so the vision was the fourth one. Where do they want to go? So we were in 2022, and Steven said, hey, we want to, let's talk about it. And I said, okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we set up a short-term contract, a consulting contract, 30 days. I may not like you, you may not like me, and we'll just call it. After 30 days, you can bounce it every 30 days we wanted to. And he said, okay. So we got to June, started that in June, and about halfway through June, he's like, okay, let's go. I'm like, all right, let's go. So that was kind of where we were. And that was the launching point that is StormImpact today. And so the vision was, okay, here's where we want to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And 5 years is you're kind of just throwing dust into the wind at this point, but we just recently, and I may be stealing a question from the future, but just recently, last week, we had our first in-person strategic company meeting. It was Friday, Saturday, and we spent most of 8 hours a day just strategizing and mapping out the next couple of years, and it was, for me, great. For those guys, they were just getting back together again. For me, it was like, give me all this information, I love it. And so it was a really good point that we were at. So hopefully that answers the question in a roundabout way. So 4 things is just, the people, the tech, the vision, and how the guys want to take it forward from this point forward. So hopefully that answers both.
Yeah, but I'm going to follow up on a couple of things. This is one of the hardest and most important things that we do when we're dealing with spin-outs is find a business leader. And I think you guys have done it very well. But I'll just throw this out there. You had to make a leap of faith because there's not a whole lot of money for salary at this point. So you had to make a leap of faith. And then the second piece of it is, no offense, but professors are not always the easiest people for business people to work with. They have different motivations, they have different experiences and styles. Talk a little bit about the leap of faith, and at least I'll throw you a bone here. I think you have a personality that works very well with these guys. How do you do that?
Thank you. Well, it's a really good question. So, as life would have it, born in the Seychelles, lived in South Africa, Gibraltar, Hong Kong, UK, traveled from that point forward with professional rugby, all around Pacific Rim and back to South Africa again and Namibia and what have you. So I've seen a lot, done a lot, and it's really, it's created this person that is in front of you today, which is this ability to be flexible and malleable to any position. And with all those different cultures and customs, you get to engage with people at a different level that may not be so extrinsic, it's maybe intrinsic. You kind of just intuitively know who people are. And certainly with international rugby, kind of thrust into that, 18 years old, playing with guys who are 26 years old and probably 1.5 times your body weight. And you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? You know, so you learn to be very flexible. You learn to be very tough. You learn that there are many different angles of approach to any problem. So, you know, some people will say, okay, this is the only thing that we can do, and this is it. And I'm like, and there's been many times, not within StormImpact, sometimes within StormImpact, but in my previous lives, they've said, you know, this is the only thing we can do. I'm like, what do you think about it this way? And they went, oh man, I didn't think about that. So in my position on the rugby field, on and off, getting bashed and bruised and everything like that, is you get to learn to step back. And my specific position, if anybody's familiar with rugby, I'm a fly half, a standoff. So if I was to equate that to a football player, it's the equivalent of being a quarterback. You are the sole decision maker at any given point, at any given time on the field, and you have to think 2-3 phases ahead. So I really took business experiences, my professional rugby playing, experiences, and then I worked with these guys and looked at their personalities, and I have known people like Steven in the past, and Scott and Brent, and I was like, oh, I know how these guys work, and I know exactly how that works. And so as we started to talk, I started to drill down a little bit deeper into their personalities, and we just gelled, we just clicked. And it's been a beautiful kind of thing ever since, I would say.
It's beautiful. I didn't even know there was a quarterback in rugby, so you can always learn things at the founders session. So we've alluded to this several times. This is a spin out from the Ohio State University. The spin out happened last summer, and you worked with the Technology Commercialization Office at the Ohio State University. I get $5 every time I put a D in front of it, which is nice. Talk a little bit about the process of working with TCO, how they helped, what they did, what the challenges were negotiating the license. Don't get into detail, but the negotiation of the license agreement and all those kind of things. Just talk a little bit about that process.
Sure. This is one of the most important things if you are developing technology for an employer like Ohio State, where they have a stake or ownership of the IP. And so Ohio State is a great supporter of commercialization and of helping faculty. As a person who had never done this before, I definitely had a lot to learn, and so it definitely took coaching and assistance both from Ohio State and external to Ohio State, and here's where I will put in a plug for Rev1, and having someone like Bob sit beside us, coach us, help us understand what questions we needed to ask and how to walk through that process. He's done it before. I'd never done it before. There were so many things that he told us about or told us to ask or encouraged us to do that really helped facilitate the process. But it's a win-win situation for Ohio State if technology gets commercialized. And so they're very much interested both within, so for me to do this, I need to have a conflict of interest plan, which is a really boring document, but it's important that I am know legally what I can do and what I can't do and how that process should work. And I need support from my boss, the department chair, from his boss, the dean, and from the VPR's office to make all of this happen. And so, like any contract negotiation, I would say it wasn't easy. It also wasn't my most fun summer ever because I was in Canada on vacation, taking calls with some of these guys and some people from TCO and lawyers trying to iron out all of the details. But everyone was approaching it in the right way, right? To get to a good end where everyone can be successful, where everyone's interests are protected, and it just sometimes takes a little while to get there. And that's the nice way of glossing over the challenges. If you are currently a faculty at Ohio State and want to hear like the slightly more bar time talk related to that, I can also provide that, but no.
No, and they're the technology commercialization office, not the technology non-commercialization office. So we all had a goal, which was getting this done, but it is very important. You're setting up the foundation, the skeleton for your company, and Ohio State is a big part of that. So it's important to get that right at the get-go.
Yeah, can I add just something real quick? From my side, on the business side, they were great to work with. They were very flexible. There were times that we'd get on a phone call, it'd be like 24 hours later, or even 6 hours later, they get on a call with you. There was 1 or 2 times I said, hey, do you mind if I just, I'm a people person, so I said, hey, do you mind if I just come down to the office and let's sit across the table? They were like, sure, let's go. And so that's when I got a good read about who they are as an organization. They have a team, an army of people in there. Everyone's willing to help. Everyone's willing to push everybody to get to the finish line because, like Steven said, it's a win-win for everyone. And having Bob in our corner and anybody from Rev1 was great because I had exited, done a negotiation with TCO before, and some things had changed to the point where I got involved. So it was great having Bob involved. So thank you. I just want to add that in there.
Thank you. And there was a sense of urgency because we had 3 customers that wanted to know who their counterparty was, and I think TCO did a really good job of making it a priority and getting it done on a good timetable. So maybe let's talk a little bit about how you're going to build the team out further. You've got the 4 core people. What else do you need to turn this into a full-fledged, fast-growing, venture-backed, hopefully, company?
Yes, so great question. So that was part of Friday, Saturday. We had all had ideas of our own that we brought to the table and we kicked around. So it's people at this point. Scott and Steven and Brent have done a great job of just, I'm going to use some speech marks, quotation points, automating the technology that we have. So there's very little that has to happen on the technology side. That's not to say that we still want to add stuff to it, don't get me wrong. But we are looking this year at data scientists. We're looking at software engineers. Specifically, we're looking 2 data scientists, 2 software engineers, and that's really just to add some muscle to what we have with Scott and with Brett. That will really propel us, and then we've got some other plans that we want to kind of implement and roll out for 2024. We're really looking, so that's the personnel side of things, personality side of things, and characteristics. We're looking for certainly knowledge. As if anybody's young in the startup world here, it's your first hire is so important, and you've got to get it right the first time. Not everyone's going to be successful, and if you are unsuccessful, it's how quickly can you pivot? How quickly can you find that next person that's going to propel you to the next spot? So really, we're just building those foundation blocks. So we're looking at somebody who's knowledgeable, flexible, willing to work, wants to collaborate, can hear the tough stuff. And that's really what it comes down to. And it's a lot of people, I can't, how do you do that? Or what person you look for? It's like, okay, everyone deals with tough stuff. It's how quickly can you rebound and get back into the saddle? That's what we're looking for. And when we're talking about data scientists and we're looking at software engineers, there's a certain personality and character trait that comes with that. So I'm looking for that. So that's where I come in, is how do I coach them up to a certain level that is going to be kind of synchronous with the company. So hopefully that answers the question. Kind of the next 12 months, that's what we're looking at. 2024, we're looking at augmenting on top of that as well.
So far, the company has been basically funded by two things: revenue from customers, which is not always the way this works, and then also you've done a really good job on the grant side. Maybe talk a little bit about the TVSF and what else on the grant side, if you would, please.
Sure. So we've been supported through a TVSF award that has been really helpful to provide us with some of the initial infrastructure, computing infrastructure, and then funding to support the development of marketing materials. And so that's website and logo, and then all of the materials that we need to reach our next set of customers. And that has been great to kind of free up capital that we can then spend on personnel and other things. And then the other place that we've been active, and this is from my what I view as one of the things that is a strength of mine, is grant writing. And so SBIRs are another excellent opportunity to grow the company. And so we have funding from NASA through their Ignite program. We received a phase 1 award last fall, and we're applying for a phase 2 that will be due in May. And so that's to help augment and do development for some new products that leverage remote sensing data so that we can get real-time data into our models to characterize vegetation conditions and look at additional products that can help serve the electrical utilities.
Yeah, so particularly in academic-based opportunities, grants are there, they're available, and they're a good source of non-dilutive funding for the business. And you're working on something that people care a lot about. So we always ask this question. I'm going to ask it now. What do you wish you'd known at the beginning of this process that you didn't? Just, boy, if I'd known that, it would have really been nice.
Yeah, I always tell my grad students to look backwards too and think about, like, for your thesis or dissertation, what would you do differently if you were restarting the process now? And so learning that and passing that along is really important to me. And I'm not just saying this because I'm sitting at Rev1, but I really wish I would have talked to Rev1 earlier. This idea had been burning a hole in my brain for a while. And I knew that this was a commercializable technology, but I had no idea of how to actually take it from my lab to market. And it really wasn't until we went through the customer learning lab that we were connected with the people and the resources to help support this. So our legal team, our marketing team, our accounting team, and our advisor all are connections that come from Rev1. And as a faculty member, I just didn't know how to navigate that process to start. And once we got going and pointed in the right direction, we picked up momentum and were really able to, I think, take some steps. But it was kind of like figuring out the order of operations. So like, what do we do first? And what's the optimal way to structure this? And so that's one thing that I wished I would have educated myself more and gotten teamed up with someone who can help on the business side, because that definitely wasn't my strength. I also think that doing things differently, there's probably some things with how we structured the contracts with the clients that could have been done differently to A pain point right now is the duration of time to get the contract signed and kind of some of the language about that. So streamlining that process as much as possible is still something that I think we can improve on.
Excuse me. To answer the same question, 3 things came to mind for me. Be patient. You're gonna make mistakes, and then also give yourself forgiveness. So the be patient side of things was from the contract side. In my previous experience, I had contract experience for sure, but the turnaround was a lot quicker. Once I got into utility contract negotiations, that's a little bit more drawn out. And so I found myself kind of asking questions a lot, you know, and pushing people, and they were like, well, nothing's going to happen right now. I'm like, okay, I got to be patient. I got to be patient. I got to be patient. So that's one thing I definitely got out of it. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. How quickly can I rebound? What's my response rate to that error or to that mistake that I've done? And that kind of leads into give yourself some forgiveness. This is a startup world. Nobody really writes a book for this. There's many people that write a book for it, but you know, there's a lot of people can tell you what to do, but unless you're actually doing your job, that's a tough one. That's hard to describe too when you're actually there and you're doing it. So really give yourself forgiveness. That's one thing I've had to learn myself is, you know, I get to the end of the day, whenever that is, because there's no real timeline on it when you're running a company, is okay, I didn't get to that today, that's okay. It's okay, I'm gonna get to that tomorrow, that's my first thing on my to-do list. So that would be my 3 things. Just be patient, know you're gonna make mistakes, and just give yourself some forgiveness along the way.
I think those are great, and you know, everybody in the room should be listening hard when they're saying that it takes a long time to complete a contract for a large amount of money with a big customer like an electric utility, even in the case of a product that they need, they know they need, and they're desperate to have. Too many times you have people come through and, oh, well, it'll take, you know, 2-month sales cycle, boom, be done, and it's silly and it's wrong. I guess just to kind of wrap up the moderated part of this thing, you've done a lot. You've built the thing, you've got some initial customers, you've done the spin out from Ohio State, you've got a business lead, you've got some grant funding. You know, where do we go from here? What do the next 24 months look like?
Yeah, so our priority number 1 is customer acquisition and customer retention. And certainly, and a plug for Think Notable, Sam Malik is here, he's doing our marketing. We are doing redesign and designing our website because we knew it's kind of being a placeholder right now. So what we want to do is be more dynamic, and so yeah, customer acquisition, really expanding into the large utility market, then 2024 getting into the small utility market where there's more customers there, not such a high dollar value, but we have a plan for that. We're also looking to start discussing venture capital money, because that will ultimately springboard us to years 3, 4, and 5 and beyond. Yeah, there's some other products that we're looking at ideating on, creating new products. Next 24 months, possibly getting into the position where we can launch our NASA vegetation management product to the market and kind of bolting that on to utilities, what they have already. So we have a significant momentum roadmap that we're looking at. It's going to be an exciting ride. I don't have as much hair to lose as everyone else because our hair will be on fire. Bob, you're welcome to come along for the ride if you like. But yeah, so exciting 24, 36 months ahead for sure. A lot of it's just building on what we've already created. And we're going to be looking at kind of in that 3rd year, we're looking at other market segments that our tool is, agnostic really by industry, so we can kind of supplant it onto another industry that we say, oh, that's interesting, we could have used that. So that's where we're at. We're doing customer discovery on that as we speak. So hopefully that helps. Again, that leads into the, some things take a while, so we're doing research now. So that's really where we're at.
Anything you want to add to that, Steven?
It's the foundation is built. So what we're doing is putting our foot down on the gas and accelerating the things that we've set up. And so, like Jamie said, sales, venture capital, and hiring will allow us to move forward.
Well, I don't have a lot of hair to offer, but I am excited to continue on with the ride. I guess with that, we'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. Put your hand up and Giselle will find you, and then you will ask the question.
Good morning. What data sets? You talk a lot about your model, your platform. Didn't talk so much about the data sets that you're using to make this all go. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So there are 300 plus features that we use in the machine learning models for producing, let's say, damage forecasts. And that includes information on the utilities assets. So where do they have poles, transformers, how many miles of overhead line, what's the age and health of the assets? So are these wood poles? If so, how old are the wood poles? When were they last installed or maintained? So a whole bunch of information on the utility asset side that comes from geographic information systems. Then we have a lot of environmental information. So land cover, slope, soil moisture, information on topography, and that tells us about the exposure of a particular place. So something at the top of a ridge or at the bottom of a valley, given the same wind gust, there's going to be a different probability of failure. And then the meteorological conditions. So we are driving this with a numerical weather prediction model and capturing all of the relevant weather conditions that influence power outages. So that's wind gusts, ice accretion, lightning, heavy precipitation, heavy wet snow. So we're looking at all of the different and testing all the different variables to see which ones are the most useful. And the final data set is from the utilities outage management system. So this is data-driven machine learning where we are training and validating the models based on the historical performance of the utility. So where in the past did they have pole or transformer failures, or how many customers were out for previous winter storms or hurricanes. And so that's often about a decade of data, a decade of daily data. This is typically at the customer level, and then we roll it up to different spatial units. So that's kind of there's even more details, but that's the high level version.
Well, then I also have to assume that then you're taking the weather data that you're seeing that NOAA is putting out there, and the Weather Service, and then extrapolating from that what's going to happen at the utility or at their service territory.
Yeah, so this is trained using the same weather forecast information, so archived historically and used for predicting in the future. So there's a variety of different numerical weather prediction models that are out there. And so we are, yes, taking those forecasts and giving predictions then out to, we could push it out to 10 days. Our products right now tend to focus on 5 to 7 days because we want to reduce the forecast uncertainty, and that's kind of the decision-making time window for most of the utilities. But yes, this is a weather forecast-driven product.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a two-part question. The first, you started talking about demographics and the demographic changes that you're seeing, and I'd like to have you explore that a little bit more from the utilities, the PUBs out there, and even geographically for different states that view climate change differently. The second question is really about having knowledge at the utilities, and then the implications that that may have as a resistance point for their reserve buildup, their CapEx, kind of a whole risk management downstream implications for their knowledge. And Steven, I'm familiar with ERCOT. That's probably a frame of reference you would get, and that's where my headspace is on.
Excellent.
Maybe explain what ERCOT is. Nobody else in the room knows.
What, do you want to tell them what your connection with ERCOT is?
Sure. ERCOT is in Texas and is focused on the utilities. I forget the actual acronym that it stands for, but it has a separate grid from the rest of the United States. And so when there is a part of the state that goes down, it can have implications, and it just ends at the border of Texas, rather than being connected to the rest of the U.S. grid to help alleviate some of those problems.
Yeah, awesome. So demographic question, what I'm thinking about here is specifically the aging workforce. So as an example, we had a relationship with Southern California Edison. We developed models for them. The model development was over a 3-year time scale. At the end of that project, I was the only person who had started the project. Every single person at the electrical utility who we had been partnering with had retired or moved different jobs or whatever. And so one of the advantages of data-driven machine learning models is to capture the relationships and to quantify the relationships between weather and infrastructure damage, so that if there's attrition or turnover, that they don't lose that information. And so that's part of what's kind of like driving and motivating this, is that these tools are meant to augment existing utility expertise, and they're co-developed with the electrical utilities who say, in our service territory, here's some of the risk factors that are really important, here's some of the things. But there's another side to the demographics as well, and that's thinking about who's most affected by electrical disruptions to the power system. And the example of Texas is very relevant here, because with the winter storms in February of 2021, the disruptions to the power system and the effects that had were not equally spread across the population. And so there was some questions about whether utilities in Texas were making decisions about who kept power and who didn't have power, in Austin in particular. And so there are absolutely a lot there to kind of unpack about thinking about the equity of this. And then to the second part of your question, in thinking about the capital expenditures, system hardening, long-term resilience, our models are mainly focused at this point on thinking about predictions in the days to week in advance. But there's no reason why, and in fact we have used these to inform long-term hardening of the infrastructure. So thinking about where are the most vulnerable locations, how will changes in storm frequency and severity influence electrical infrastructure so that they can prioritize the types of hardening or installing microgrids or distributed generation or any of the other potential solutions to make the grid more resilient in the future as a result of changing storm frequency. So the tools are different, or the same, the application might be a little bit different when we're thinking about kind of the longer term planning horizons.
Yeah, thank you all for this conversation. My question is about capital raising. Steve, you mentioned about how you won some grants, you secured some early contracts that were really important for the next phases. Then you mentioned about venture capital, looking into that. What were the early stages like for you in terms of raising money? How did you get into the place to, I'm assuming you were using a lot of free time, well, quote unquote free time, your own time to submit those grants, to secure the contracts, but how was that early phase when you were first starting to raise money?
Yes. We have 2 more questions.
Sure. So the time balancing part is really a significant challenge. I am a full-time employee of The Ohio State University, and so I can only spend 1 day a week, 20% of my time on working for the company. And so I have to be very, very focused. And Jamie knows I get a little prickly when the time that I want to spend on things that are really important gets taken up with meetings and things that I think maybe are less important. And so part of the being strategic is really dividing and conquering and saying, hey Jamie, you have to take and run with this thing because I can't put time into that. And the things that I am better at, like writing grants or talking to customers about the details of the model, because I've built the model, been working on the models for almost 20 years, that I can talk about that all day long, and that's harder for Jamie or Scott or some of the other people who are specialized in other areas. So we have not sought or received any funding to this point other than grants and customer support. And so that is something that we are going to be doing in the future. And this was one of those order of operations questions that I had at the beginning, like when is the right time to do this, and how much, and how can I use it to the best strategic use? And I still don't think I'm an expert on that, so I'm gonna let one of these other people chime in to help assist, but in all honesty, we have not sought and there's a reason for that. We want to make sure that we have the best possible foundation before opening the door to have other people sitting at the table.
So just real quick, to answer your question, early doors, it was belief and sacrifice. You know, do I believe in the technology? Do I believe in the team? What am I willing to sacrifice? So my wife, AKA my accountant, said, you know, we have this much runway. I'm like, okay. And so that was the sacrifice side of things. The belief side of it is just on the personal side, having lived in Hong Kong and gone through a couple of typhoons, you get to know what the sound of a storm is and the impact thereof. And then my parents also, in their multiple movements around the globe, they stayed in the Bahamas. They lived in the Bahamas for, I think, 9 years at that point. So they went through Hurricane Andrew, which went right over the top. And not being able to get a hold of them 7 to 10 days, are you okay? And then obviously they were okay in the end. But to hear about the stories, I'm like, I have got to get involved somehow with technology because that's where I want to be. And then this climate side of things, and so this came along, and so we started talking. It's like, what are you willing to sacrifice, Jamie? This is what we're willing to do, and let's see what the runway is. And so it really came down to, okay, we're going to blow into our hands and roll the dice and see what happens. But we knew we had something. We just knew it was going to take a little bit of time, but we were all on board.
I'm going to add one thing to expand this to the other founders in the room. They were able to get 6-figure contracts from customers as an unfunded startup. Now, yeah, it helps to be part of Ohio State, it's a credibility, I get that, but I think all too often people assume that no one would want to pay for their early stage product. If you're solving an important enough problem, that is the best way to fund your company. Gives you credibility, gives you money that's non-dilutive, and you learn from your customers. So please, if you take anything out of this session today, think about that. Best source of funding for your company is a customer willing to pay you for the product.
Hey guys, so you just perfectly queued up my next question. The sales ops side of me here wants to better understand your MVP sales process. So I know when we first talked, Jamie, I was blown away by the contract sizes and just the recognition of the logos that you guys have landed. can you talk about some of the objections that you guys faced in that MVP stage? Being a 3-4 person company, I mean, what diligence did you guys have to go through to get those early contracts? Because they've been really significant, right? I'm just really interested in understanding how you guys got through the door, got over that hump. What type of objections came up, and ultimately, how did you handle them? What was the secret sauce that got you guys those first 3 sales?
Well, I can't give away the recipe to the secret sauce. Otherwise, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not sure there is a secret sauce. We talked to a lot of prospective customers. We carefully developed and validated our models, and one of the things that set us apart is because we came from academics, they knew that we were probably overly honest, so we told them all the weaknesses of our models and all the things that we wanted to fix, because as scientists, that's what we were always thinking about. And it wasn't a heavy-handed sales pitch. It was like, we want to understand the problem that you're dealing with, and we want to design a product that can solve that problem. And by the way, because of who we have working in our lab, we have people who are really, really capable and skillful and who can do good things. And it was a great partnership where we didn't say, develop something, throw it over the fence, use this. It was co-developed. So we worked with them along the way to understand their data, to understand their problem, and to use that information to improve the MVP. And so I think that probably is part of it. Also, when we were at OSU, then, like pricing is not like, what I could charge them was what it actually cost me in terms of people's time and effort to develop it. And so probably there's a little bit of a competitive price advantage in that some of our competitors may have a larger number initially, and so anyways, that's the other part.
Not advocating pricing based on cost, however.
No,
Yeah.
well, I'm just saying, like at OSU, when I write a contract, I can't build profit into it. So in the first days when we developed those relationships, the dollar value of the contract was smaller, probably, and a little bit more competitive because of that, yeah.
If you're solving an important problem, people will be willing to pay for it. If they're not willing to pay for it, maybe you're not solving an important problem enough. And I guess for that, I'll turn it, should I?
Just one more question.
Oh, we have time for one more question.
Do you mind if I ask a second one real quick?
I think that's a good idea.
All right, awesome. So this one's for Jamie. I know something that we've talked about a lot is EOS. Our company's really passionate about it. I know that you guys used it in your prior company. I'm curious for you, coming in as a business lead, is it something that you have taken advantage of, that you've implemented yet? I've always been curious how EOS works in a startup setting and whether the rigidity of it actually inhibits the agility required, as an early stage startup company. So if you could talk just a little bit more about what you use process-wise to come in and actually implement a meeting cadence and start creating some operations around which, what was originally 3 really intellectual people, not necessarily functioning as a company.
Really good question. EOS, as some of you may know, is rigid with the
Go through what EOS stands for, everybody in the room.
Entrepreneurial Operating System. So it is a meeting tool platform that you can. In what I've used it in as a bigger corporation, it actually gives you a good layout to an agenda, timing, people are held accountable, et cetera, and then it kind of feeds into the next week, and it gives everyone tasks to do. So to your question, Sam, would I use EOS? Have I used EOS? Yes. I do like it, but I've got to respect the environment that we're in. We have one person who's out of state. We have one person who lives in state, out of city, and then we've got one as a faculty member who's limited time, and then you've got me. So operationally, I'm like, I can't have an EOS 90-minute meeting once a week or once every quarter, but how can I do a variation on a theme? So what I did is I knew that these professionals, founders, have an opinion. and they want to express that opinion in whatever shape or form. So, and there are different time zones, so I set up my mini EOS for each of the individual employees every week. Because I know there's only going to be limited time, limited opportunities to get everyone in the same room. We were just fortunate last week that the planets aligned. So they all have opinions, and one of the people who's going to remain nameless, not Steven, but one of the people who's going to remain nameless, there's only two others. You flip your coin, you get the win. They're an introvert, and they were like, I don't want to speak in front of people. I don't want to speak in front of our group. I'm like, okay, I'll take you one-on-one. Let's go. You tell me your ideas. And my gosh, when I asked that question, all this information came out. I'm like, I can use that, I use that, I can use that. And I said, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do. I'm going to call you next week. And so to your point, yes, I use EOS, and no, I don't use EOS. I use a hybrid of it. But ultimately, it's my job to make sure everyone's held accountable and make sure when we keep on pushing this rock down the road a little bit further, and that's where it's got to our momentum, to where we are right now. We haven't quite picked up the speed, but we're almost there. We're getting there.
All right, well, I'll hand the mic over to Ashley. She has a mic. You don't need one mic.
I got one. Got my own mic now. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and we can give a round of applause for